June 8, 1967. 34 American sailors, Marines, National Security Agency people, and CIA personnel were blown to bits by one of 5 torpedoes targeted by the Israeli torpedo gunboat. The crew of the USS Liberty is the most decorated crew since World War II. It is among the most decorated crews for a single engagement in the entire history of the United States Navy. Yet the attack has never received a full investigation. The USS Liberty was a virtually unarmed American spy ship that was attacked the afternoon of June 8, 1967. Israeli reconnaissance aircraft closely studied the Liberty for over 8 hours prior to the attack. A 5x7 American flag was shot away by the attacking aircraft. Within minutes, a 7x13 American Holiday Ensign flag was flown during the attack. The Liberty was in international waters and was clearly marked as an American ship. The Israeli attack by combined air and naval forces spanned 2 hours. The air attack alone lasted approximately 25 minutes, consisting of more than 30 sorties by approximately 12 separate planes using cannon and rockets, which left 821 holes in the ship. Napalm was dropped. Following the air attack, 3 Israeli motor torpedo boats torpedoed the ship, causing a 40 by 40 foot wide hole in her hull, and machine gunning firefighters and stretchers, bearers attempting to save their ship and crew. More than 5,000 machine gun bullet holes were later counted on the Liberty's hull. After the attack was thought to have ended, 3 life rafts were lowered into the water to rescue the most seriously wounded. The Israeli torpedo boats returned and machine-gunned these life rafts at close range. They sunk 2 life rafts and took one aboard their boat as a trophy of the kill. All 5 air traffic distress signals were jammed throughout the attack. Although American carrier-based air support was only 40 minutes away, help did not reach the Liberty for 17 hours. Navy fighters were launched from the USS America, plus the USS Saratoga while the Liberty was under attack. However, they were quickly recalled by the White House. On that horrific day, 34 American sailors were killed and 174 were injured, a casualty rate of 70%. This is among the highest casualty rate ever inflicted upon a U.S. naval vessel. The ship's survivors were told to never speak of this event or threats of court-martial, prison, or worse, was threatened. The Liberty was sent to Malta for repairs over 1,000 miles in hopes it would sink on the way there, therefore no evidence of the attack.
This film should shock decent Americans. Above all, men and women who've served in America's armed forces. It will shock particularly as it was an attack not by terrorists implacably opposed to the United States, as is the case of the USS Cole.
When the plane struck, it was without provocation and certainly unexpected. And they seemed to descend on us from all directions at the same time. Those rockets and machine guns tore the ship. It killed men on deck. And we were defenseless.
I was outside fighting fires and doing other damage control work throughout the duration of the attack. At the same time, I was able to observe the jets flying overhead, and I also observed the American flag flying from the mast. At no time did that flag hang limp from the mast.
I was one of the 2 signalmen on the USS Liberty when the ship was attacked, and my only job during the attack was to make sure that the flag was flying, so every few minutes I would walk up at the signal bridge up at the mast.
The initial strike by the planes on the ship commenced at about 5 minutes after 2 in the afternoon, about 8 June. And the attack lasted about 20 minutes. The ship was fired at from port to starboard, starboard to port, stem to stern, and there was not a single compartment above the waterline that did not have one or more direct penetration by a rocket, machine gun, and they also dropped napalm on the bridge with the ship.
At 2:35 p.m., Defense Secretary Robert McNamara recalled the 12 Navy fighters that had been sent to our defense by the carrier Saratoga. At that time, no one aboard the Liberty had identified the attacking Israelis. It was 1.5 hours later that our embassy in Israel first told Washington that Israelis had attacked a ship, possibly a U.S. Navy ship. How then did McNamara know to recall the help sent to defend the Liberty?
A short time after the air attack had been completed, the 3 torpedo boats approached us from our starboard quarter at high speed and in an apparent torpedo launch attitude.
34 were killed, another 172 were wounded. The care of these people was done by myself with the assistance of 2 corpsmen. The corpsmen did many things of minor surgery, and I just had so much to do. Keeping people together, keeping their limbs attached to their body.
On the day of the attack, I tried to coordinate communications. The Israelis had taken out all of our transmitting antennas. My RMs, not knowing any better during the strafing runs, were stringing long wires so that we could get an SOS out. And thanks to them, the ones that survived, we did get an SOS out to the USS American. Without George Golden, the ship would have sunk. Had it sunk, I assume when debris washed ashore the next day, it would have been blamed on Egypt. Many, many miracles that day. I shouldn't be here. After watertight integrity had been established and the hatch had been sailed, they reopened it as I floated by. Butch Schnell, went down and pulled me out. I could feel so big. None of us should be alive. I noticed a very large helicopter with Israeli markings hovering very close to us. I looked in the door of the helicopter, which was open, and I could see a number of Israelis carrying automatic weapons. They had just heard that the 6th Fleet had finally launched aircraft to come to our assistance, and so they just left the scene.
Helicopter gunships, I'm sure in my mind, would have picked off survivors with the abandoned ship. They were sent there to finish us off. The aircraft were sent to make us incommunicado so we couldn't send an SOS out. The torpedo boats were sent to sink us, and the helicopters were sent to pick off survivors so there'd be no trace. It was a perfectly executed military operation. If you look at the photographs of the Liberty after the attack, on the first strafing run, they used heat-seeking missiles that took out the tuning section of every transmitting antenna on the ship. In less than 2 seconds, they had taken out all our communication capability. Admiral Thomas Morter is the longest-serving active 4-star admiral in American history. He is the only American admiral to have commanded both the Atlantic and Pacific fleets. He was head of NATO forces, served as chief of naval operations, and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for 2 terms. The Navy's chief fighter, the F-14 Tomcat, was named after Admiral Tom Morter.
The question is, if the Israelis thought the frequencies they jammed were in fact broadcast by the Egyptian ship, why did they jam the American frequency? There's no question about the fact that the jamming of the Liberty frequencies was deliberate and was undoubtedly ordered by high authority. The large parts of the casualties were followed by torpedo boats that have been prevented from making those attacks by the aircraft that were on their way to help when they were recalled.
Admiral Arleigh Burt was known as Mr. Navy. His long and illustrious career was capped by him becoming the Chief of Naval Operations. The high-tech modern American Navy destroyers were named the Arleigh E. Burke class of destroyer.
I don't know yet why we didn't protect that ship. I don't know why the Israelis would take such terrific chances. It must have been something that was very important to them to decide to attack without considering the probability of war.
Recuperating from serious throat surgery, the Saratoga skipper, Joe Tully, spoke about the launch and recall of protective aircraft.
I had launch ready at that time 12 aircraft, conventionally armed, and I immediately launched them. And to my surprise, the America did not launch. About the same time, a message came from Rear Admiral Larry Geis, who was the Carrier Division commander, and who was not the officer in tactical command, but who was senior to me, who had somehow been given tactical command or assumed it, ordering the strike aircraft to return to Saratoga.
And it was the first time that the hot line, the red line between Washington and Moscow, had been activated. And the message from the United States to Chairman Kosygin at the time was, advise General Nasser that the American planes are going to be launched to determine what the status of the Liberty was.
I have spent a large part of my life flying over the oceans and identifying ships. And this ship was perhaps the easiest ship to identify that was listed in the United States Navy. Equipped with antenna from bow to stern, pointing in every direction. It reminds one of a large, vigorous lobster, and a look that made it extremely easy to recognize. And so I will never buy the idea that the pilots thought this was some other ship.
And it appeared from the ferocity of the attack that the intent of the attackers was to sink the ship. Maybe they hoped to have no survivors so that they would not be held accountable for the attack after it occurred.
I never myself accepted the Israeli purported explanation. Accidents don't occur through repeated attacks by surface vessels and by aircraft. It obviously was a decision taken pretty high up on the Israeli side because it involved combined forces. The ship was flying an American flag. Even if it had been unidentified from an Israeli point of view, it was a reckless thing for them to do. Suppose it had been a Soviet ship. That could have produced very large problems indeed.
George Ball, the brilliant and courageous Undersecretary of State at the time of the '67 war, wrote about the attack of the Liberty subsequently. He said, "The ultimate lesson of the Liberty attack was that it had far more effect on policy in Israel than in America. Israel's leaders concluded that nothing they might do would offend the Americans to the point of reprisal. If America's leaders did not have the courage to punish Israel for the blatant murder of American citizens, it seemed clear that their American friends would let them get away with almost anything."
Fleet Tut Popperville would be on escort into Malta. Divers rigged a large canvas over the torpedo hull, and it was secured in place using ropes that were passed under the hull and over the main deck. Once the canvas was in place, Liberty could proceed under its own power towards Malta. Once we were in dry dock in Malta, then came the gruesome task of removing the bodies retrieved from the research ships. I was unfortunate enough to draw the first shift as part of our division, which would be used to cut the debris away from the bodies so they could be researched. First body to come out was almost unrecognizable. Due to being in salt water for 6 days, the body was almost completely hairless. Fingerprinted the body, put it in a body bag, moved it out of the space. This continued through the night and on into the next day. After 33 days in Malta, and the Liberty was repaired, brought the ship back to Norfolk. Now it was open. Liberty was home. All that will never be over until the truth is.
The cover-up began with the report of the casualties. The first word that we get out was before the torpedo attack that we had 9 dead and 75 wounded. This has been the number that has almost invariably appeared in the newspapers as an attempt to minimize the nature of the attack, the ferocity of the attack, the unjustifiable nature of the attack.
There was no press campaign very well. Some of this in the society for the benefit of American people. As a matter of fact, that in many cases the press supported the Israeli campaign.
Future Judge Advocate General of the Navy, Rear Admiral Merlin Starring, was given less than 24 hours to review the 600-page Court of Inquiry report.
In the course of my career as a Navy lawyer, I have been called upon to review, take actions upon hundreds of investigations of various degrees of importance and volume. This is the only instance in which a record of such an investigation has been withdrawn from me after I have been asked to review it and had not been given an opportunity to complete my advice to the convening authority. As you know, it's a voluminous document. One of the things that I initially had difficulty with, and still do, is the fact that the very first statement of fact that the court arrived at and presented was this: available evidence combines to indicate the attack on Liberty on 8 June was in fact a case of mistaken identity. That is the sort of thing in this record that I found great difficulty in supporting from the evidence that was included. I'm convinced that it was withdrawn from me in this instance because of my statement to Captain Boston that I was having serious problems with the evidence that was available to support the statements of fact.
In the subsequent cover-up, the Israelis maintained that they thought the Liberty was the small Egyptian freighter, the Al-Qusair. This is not credible. Not only was the Liberty flying a large American flag, but it was 5 times as large as the Al-Qusair, and its profile was unique. It bore no resemblance whatsoever to the Egyptian ship.
Tardella was the deputy director at the time of the attack. Tardella, when he received the copy of the Israeli mistake explanation, wrote across the top of it a Nike whitewash. He didn't believe it at all. And he later wrote another memorandum for the record indicating that he thought that the most likely explanation was that the Israelis attacked the Liberty because they didn't want the Liberty to hear what was going on in the Sinai. And this is the highest professional at NSA. In addition, the director of NSA at the time, Marco Carter, told me that he thought it was deliberate. In addition to that, he was very offended in another memorandum he wrote that it appeared that the Johnson administration wanted to cover up the whole thing. They actually wanted to sink the ship so that Israel wouldn't be embarrassed.
In late 1991, Dwight Porter, who was ambassador to Lebanon during the 1967 war, told columnists Evans and Novak that immediately after the attack on the Liberty, the CIA station chief handed him intercepted messages between the Israeli war room and their planes. The pilots were given orders to attack the ship, and they replied immediately that it was an American ship. Israeli headquarters responded, "You have your orders, attack the ship." The pilots tried once again, but it's an American ship. We can see its flag. Headquarters insisted, you have your orders, attack it. And attack it they did, and the consequences are well known.
But one of the things I found out was that that had never been discovered before was the fact that at the time the Liberty was attacked, the NSA also had an eavesdropping plane flying high above the scene of the action. It was an EC-121, and during the entire course of the war, the U.S. Had eavesdropping planes going over the area, collecting signals, eavesdropping on what was going on below. And this plane was flying right over the scene of the attack. And I talked to two of the crew members of the plane, and both of them agreed that what they heard were comments from both the pilots and the torpedo boat personnel mentioning the U.S. flag. Now that flies in the face of what the Israeli explanation says. The Israeli explanation says nobody on either the plane or the ship ever saw a U.S. flag.
Evans and Novak got further confirmation of the Israeli attack from an American-born Israeli major, Seth Metz, who was in the Israeli war room at the time of the attack. He told the reporters, quote, "Everyone felt that it was an American ship and that it was the Liberty. No comments about the markings, about the flag. Everybody in the room was convinced it was an American ship," unquote. Mintz told Evans and Novak that the Israelis were guilty of an outrage. True, but the American suppression of the truth was an equal outrage.
Well, at the time, the Liberty was off the coast of the Sinai, off the coast of where El Arish was on the Sinai Peninsula. According to Israeli military historians who wrote reports of it at the time, and other eyewitnesses, the Israeli military was killing prisoners, Egyptian prisoners, committing war crimes, desperate acts of war crimes in order to, so they wouldn't have to transport the prisoners because they had no place to put the prisoners. They decided to take them off this expedient method and just kill them.
If the planes dispatched by the Saratoga had continued to the rescue, the Israelis would have been driven off. But Washington took the Israelis at their word. They said they had recognized their error and they apologized. And the attack had already stopped, they said, but they were lying. The attack continued for another hour and 20 minutes, during which 25 more American sailors died and 110 more were wounded. All would have been spared if the American planes sent to help them recalled by Washington.
The point was, the attack did take place. There were a lot of reasons that the Israelis would have wanted to hide things from the U.S., and that's why there's a need for investigation. I mean, you're not going to take the word of somebody who was the principal person who caused it. That'd be like taking the word of a defendant in a shooting.
The Navy Board of Inquiry would not admit testimony about the jamming, the recall of the unmarked planes, the shooting of life rafts, and other material that we tried to present. They asked questions. We were allowed to answer those questions. Period. Never before has the U.S. Navy ignored eyewitness testimony of American military to accept on faith the story told by their attackers.
I have never accepted the Israeli explanation, and so far as I am concerned, the affair of the USS Liberty remains a scar on the relations between Israel and the United States.
Things like this don't happen. Things are caused to happen. There must be some reason why more is not known. There must be some reason why we didn't react more deliberately, more directly, more positively, as we have reacted many times in our history before and since.
In case of the Liberty, this is the first time, to my knowledge, where a United States warship has been attacked without warning and no action whatever was taken to investigate this situation on the part of the Congress. I have urged this over and over again, and I still think that the attack on the Liberty warrants a full-fledged investigation by the Congress of the United States.
USS Liberty survivors have been rebuffed by our own government for 56 years, as well as the Israeli government. Our Congress, all presidents from LBJ to Biden, could care less about the truth. They stand by the lie. It was mistaken identity. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The attack was pre-planned, premeditated. By the Israeli Air Forces and Naval Forces, this savage attack had the blessings of our government to attack our ship and sink it. The cover-up was, and is, firmly in place. The most trusted spies this country has to offer, NSA, CIA spies, and more, don't lie. The USS Liberty survivors had been labeled Nazis, Jew haters, anti-Semitic pigs for telling the truth. The USS Liberty crew didn't kill anybody. Israel did all of the killing, and we get labeled. The survivors' goals are to help save our nation from anything like this happening again. The truth must prevail, or our republic will fall. If our ship would have sunk as planned, the attack would have been blamed on Egypt and Nasser. A nuclear war was prevented by the Liberty not sinking, with only minutes to spare. Millions of lives were spared from a nuclear holocaust. The American Legion put Glenn Oliphant in jail. His only crime, along with Ernie Gallo, was wanting a booth to hand out literature about the Liberty at the National Convention. He was charged with assault because he tore up his American Legion card and it landed on a woman. She filed trumped-up charges against him for assault. He spent one night in jail. That's what this nation, supposedly for veterans, does to combat wounded veterans, especially the USS Liberty. We have been banned for life from the American Legion. The USS Liberty is one of the most decorated crews for a single attack in naval history. The medals received were the Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, Silver Stars, Bronze Stars with the V Purple Hearts, Combat Action Ribbon, and the Presidential Unit Citation. The surviving crew will never forget the men that freely gave up their lives for their shipmates and the country that they love that put a knife in their back. The USS Liberty was betrayed by their own government and attacked by Israel. Not only was this an attack on an American ship, but an attack on America, an attack of war. Many war crimes were committed that day against the United States naval vessel, and Israel has never been held accountable.
God saved our ship. We were just His servants. We continued to be His servants for the truth. That's why He spared us.